sort of new in the retail vernacular, I think. People, when they think about online payments, the first thing that comes to mind is those debit and credit cards just punching in numbers. It's so much more today. Define those alternative payments for us, if you will.
I really think almost the phrase alternative payment methods is almost kind of a misnomer these days because the alternative payment methods are just as commonplace now as the traditional payment methods.
Welcome into the Independent Thinking Podcast. This is your host, Rob Stott. Looking back at the recent holiday shopping season, I think one of the things we'd notice, and we actually covered it on the Independent Thinking blog, is the fact that alternative payments, which we'll get into, maybe not the best term for them, but these alternative payments, things like mobile wallets and pay in four, buy online, pick up in store, those types of ways of checking out for the customer have really increased in usage over the last number of years, and really played a big role in the holiday shopping season this past year in winter 2023. So we took this opportunity looking back, and we have a great partner in PayPal here at Nationwide Marketing Group that is a big player, if not the biggest player in the digital e-commerce space. And wanted to take the opportunity to have them on the podcast to talk about, this world of e-commerce and, looking at not just those alternative payment models, but other ways of implementing e-commerce into your digital and website strategy to, see how independent retailers can leverage these tools in a number of ways to impact their business. And to do so, we invited Tiffany Raymond, the head of global customer advocacy for PayPal, onto the podcast this week to chat about that and a whole lot more. And what I think my biggest takeaway from the conversation is that a lot of the things that we hear from Tiffany over the course of this discussion are things that we at Nationwide have told our own members, you, our listeners, in regards to this digital landscape and e-commerce specifically. So I think interesting to hear her have those discussions and bring up the points that she does, and really, I think validate for both Nationwide and our members just how important and how much opportunity exists in e-commerce. So excited to have her on, and of course, excited to have PayPal as a brand on this podcast. So let's just dive into it. This is Tiffany Raymond of PayPal here on the Independent Thinking Podcast. All right, we are back on the Independent Thinking Podcast, and excited today to dive into the world of consumer finance, payments, right? And we got who better to talk to than probably the leading global brand in this payment space and alternative payments in PayPal. And today we've got Tiffany Raymond, head of Dr. Tiffany Raymond, correction, rewind, repeat. Dr. Tiffany Raymond, head of global customer advocacy at PayPal. Excited to have you on talking from the other side of the state, right? I'm in Philly, you're in Pittsburgh. So we'll try to keep it cordial on this podcast.
Cordial, nothing but love for you.
No.
I think of it as Team PA.
No, that's fantastic. They didn't tell me that when I went to school at Duquesne, but they kind of gave me trouble for my orange and black Philadelphia Flyers fandom, but that's okay. I appreciate all of the black and gold and everything that goes on out in Pittsburgh. So excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, first of all, we'll start right, with you. Tell us about yourself, your background, your role at PayPal, and then we'll kind of dive into it all.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Rob. First of all, I just want to say it's just a pleasure and it's an honor to be here. So thanks for inviting me. And that's a lot of question, but I'll do my best to kind of hit all those bases around a little bit about me and my background and my kind of path to PayPal. So yeah, as noted, I'm Dr. Tiffany Raymond, or Dr. T, as they like to call me here at PayPal, among friends as we are. And so I do lead global customer advocacy here at PayPal. I've been here for over 9 years. So in fact, it'll be a full decade next August. So excited to hit that milestone. I think, background wise, my background is pretty untraditional for someone who's in the fintech space. A lot of my colleagues came up through, the card networks and acquirers and things like that. For me, both of my parents were writers. My dad was an academic, and that's what I thought I was going to do. My whole upbringing. And so I was really laser focused on that. I went straight from high school In fact, I grew up in Northern California, if you want to know, in the wine country in a town called Petaluma, where I was actually the fourth consecutive generation graduate from the same high school. So, which is extremely rare, and
Yeah.
particularly in California. And so I went straight from there to earn my undergraduate at the University of Arkansas, where I graduated with honors. And then I went to the University of Tennessee, where I earned my master's degree. And then I came back to California, but kind of like the two sides of Pennsylvania, I went to the dark side and I went to Southern
Yes.
California. And I attended the University of Southern California, and I earned another master's degree and my doctorate. So I was definitely on that track to, being an academician. And as I was working on my doctorate, I, kind of needed some extra money for that teaching stipend did not really cover life in Los Angeles. And so I kind of had my own little side hustle. And so I started working at a .com. And so kind of unusual perhaps. And it was, this might sound weird to say, but I really fell in love with working in business. And it had never really entered my consciousness as something I might do or even
Yeah.
pursue. But I loved the kind of just collaboration, teamwork, really getting to work together with people towards a common goal. And that's something that you very much don't have in kind of the lonely halls of academia. And something that I very much, didn't realize how much I craved that. And so, but I'm kind of a stubborn person. And so I did continue, and I finished my doctorate, even though I knew well before I finished it that I was not going to pursue that as a career path anymore. Um, but it was a goal I always had, and so it was good
Yeah.
to accomplish that. And so anyway, so when I worked at this.com, I worked at a company called LegalZoom.com, and they were the original, really, legal tech company. So
Yeah.
they kind of founded that whole space of legal tech, and I was actually employee number 12 there.
Wow.
So it was a one room startup, truly, when I started working there, and then I was there for over a decade. And by the time I left, it was a very much a mature enterprise business. So I
Yeah.
really got to go on an incredible journey of, seeing and learning so many parts of the business. And what really, my all of my favorite roles were really around, serving our customers,
Mhm.
and being that kind of customer advocate. And so particularly, we were the largest, former of small businesses in the U.S. Through limited liability companies and through
Mhm.
corporations, and so that was something I worked with very closely. Worked with our merchants, and so that was a really amazing journey. And so then I kind of made the jump from legal tech over to fintech.
Yeah.
Working here at PayPal. So I think PayPal and LegalZoom are both kind of, the pioneers in their space.
Yeah.
They're both the originators, and they both really leaned into, using technology to scale.
Mm.
And using technology to really, make life, hopefully easier and better for people, right?
No,
And
it's
that's really, I think, is so what I love so much about PayPal is that we
yeah.
were that pioneer in the space of digital wallets and digital payments, and we're still the industry leader over 20 years later. So that's not
Yeah.
a that's
It's
not an easy crown to keep hold of, but I think it's a testimony to,
but
just kind of our innovative spirit.
been able to do it. And it's kind of funny, you think about the first thing that comes to my mind is you mentioned obviously academia, a lot of writing and heads down, that sort of stuff. But to
Right.
PayPal, where it's more numbers and finance, like, do you ever,
Mhm.
joke? I'm sure you get a lot of about, wanting to be a writer, but then kind of getting into a company that's in the finance space and, writing. And how are those SAT scores in terms of like math as opposed to reading, right?
Very strong in both. I was a valedictorian, so you gotta
Oh,
have,
there you go.
you gotta have both. So
So you
I,
you were set up to do what
I
you
weigh
wanted.
equally. Yes, yes.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about like the role of customer advocacy too. Like, what does that mean
Yeah.
at PayPal and kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like to think I have the best job at the company. So, um, it's always a good view to have. So customer advocacy, in our case, in my team's case, when we're talking about customers, we're really talking about merchants and partners specifically. Now, PayPal has over 35 million merchants in our portfolio, so that is a very large family. globally. We're very proud to serve that family. And really, customer advocacy is about identifying those merchants and partners who have had a good experience with our products and solutions, and then really helping them, amplify that experience, and kind of, externalize that in a form factor. It could be a video, it could be a case study, it could be a testimonial, right? It could be an event. So there's lots of different ways that, our advocates can, kind of altitudes that they can engage at. And our goal, one way I really think about what I do is just kind of unlocking the power of our super sellers, right?
Yeah.
Because, when you have a happy customer who wants to talk about how your products and solutions have driven value for their business, that's much more relatable to other businesses
Mhm.
than, you talking about how great you are. So,
Yeah. Well, it's an important thing to point out because I ask it for a couple of reasons. One, to set up
mhm,
sort of where we're going, but two,
yeah,
because our members too, right?
yeah,
As retailers, they need to know that that's something that they should be doing too. And I think a lot of them
yeah,
do, but the idea that you can talk about your business and how great you are, and it
right.
means something, right? But to have your customers, it's those online reviews, especially in the retail space, that we kind of
Mhm.
harp on and try to get them to find ways to sort of get them out of their customers to go online and give that
Yeah,
review, that Google review, right, about the
yeah,
experience they had with that business. And
yeah.
so it's an important sort of point to make about the role of the customer in your success as a business. So but it
Mhm.
also, back to the PayPal side, it kind of it gives you line of sight into the things that are going on today in this landscape, and how
Yeah.
your customers or the advocates are using the platform in a way that is amplifying their business and helping them succeed. So
Mhm.
kind of sets up the picture. What you mentioned kind of the breadth of how many customers you guys work with. What's that landscape like today? Like, e-commerce is such a big, we've seen it explode in retail,
Mhm.
over the last 15, 20 years. So, paint that picture for us of like what the e-commerce landscape looks like today, and sort of, in the scope of PayPal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, e-commerce has only, continued to be more relevant since this sort of supercharged acceleration of the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think post-pandemic there was some sort of, I don't want to say concern, but are things going to back off and to what extent they might back off? But we haven't really, seen that. I think it really comes down to the fact that consumers who are maybe more, slightly digitally engaged on the e-commerce side are now more fully engaged and really like the convenience, right? The speed, the choice, the price that they can, find when they're, in the e-commerce setting. And then I think, just thinking about, right, this particular moment in time, we're in a high inflation zone, and shopping online gives consumers a lot more choice around pricing, right? You're not sort of limited by the prices that you can drive to.
Yeah.
And so, as consumers are looking to economize and stretch their dollar, e-commerce is also a great way for them to do that. So it really kind of helps them at any given moment in time, whether that's sort of pandemic and being in lockdown, or now, how can we stretch our dollars
Yeah.
in this, maybe tighter economic environment with the price of goods and services going up. So I think that's why it's really, so critical to have that, online presence, regardless of, what type of merchant you are, because that's not going to slow down, and it really provides a secondary front door for
Yeah.
you, right? Your business can only be, physically open during certain hours, but if I'm browsing online at midnight in my pajamas, as we often all do, then you can be there to meet and greet your customers through, or your potential customers through, an online presence. So, participating in that e-commerce opportunity and that landscape is really critical.
Yeah. And I mean, the last couple of years, I think, prove that to any naysayers that may have still existed. Especially, I feel like
Mhm.
you're always independent retailers. They're so locally focused, so they feel like, well, yeah,
Yeah,
kind of necessary evil in terms of the website and e-commerce,
yeah,
but really kind of proved its case. I think, especially over the last couple of years, with just it is that, to your point, the second front door, right? If a customer
mhm,
can't get out of their house, be be it a pandemic, weather, any reason. They want to, they work from home. You know, hey, what, you know, there's reasons to you know, have that online presence and put it forth as something that you want to put effort into
Mhm.
and you know, treat it like a second showroom, even, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's where so
Yeah.
much of um, the research today goes into, you know, prior to making, especially in, you know, appliance and furniture and
Yeah.
major consumer electronics, you know, customers are going to do that research before they make that big purchase,
Yeah.
right? So having a
Yeah.
website that has the tools, the info, you know, the payment opportunities to be able to check out and make those purchases, all the more
Mhm.
important. But and when I say payment, you know, you know, we talk about e-com and kind of what that's become
Mhm.
online. More than just debit and credit cards today. So talk about
Yeah.
the, you know, we dove into this recently on the I don't think the podcast, but the independent thinking blog for Nationwide Marketing Group, just about, you know, alternative payments and kind of what that means today. Sort of new in the retail vernacular, I
Mm.
think. You know, people
Yeah.
when they think about online payments, the first thing that comes to mind is those debit and credit cards just punching in numbers, but
Right.
it's so much more today. So kind of set that up for us and what that looks like and define those alternative payments for us, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think I'll kind of double back around to
Yeah.
this, online presence, because I think, if there are kind of holdouts out there, or maybe you're thinking, I can't sell my actual products online, right? Maybe, as a local provider, I can't, sell a refrigerator online. I'm not set up for that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still have that website and that
Yeah.
secondary front door, because, the reality is in the sort of, Amazon era, people do tend to think more of, big box retailers. And so you want to make sure you don't get lost in that consideration set. And that's really where having your website, something as simple as an About Us page, that's your chance to tell your story, introduce yourself. If I was opening a business in Petaluma where I went to high school, I would forefront that I was a fourth generation graduate from Petaluma High,
Yeah.
because that demonstrates, I have roots. You can trust me. I am someone who is committed to the community. And so, I can't talk to every person who comes through my door, but you can, talk to them through your site and really differentiate yourself, really humanize yourself, right? Not to say that, big brands, lack humanity. That's certainly not the case with PayPal. But it's your chance to differentiate yourself and help people understand who you are, build that trust. And trust is ultimately a driver of purchasing behavior, right?
No.
I'm going to get emotionally attached to you reading about you, and then I'm going to want to give you my business, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
prioritize you. And so don't miss out on that opportunity. And I like that we were talking earlier about reviews, because that was another thing that I wanted to touch on as well, is that that's where people turn to for information. And
Hmm.
so make sure that you're asking your happy, satisfied customers to write reviews on Yelp and on Google,
Yeah.
because you don't want to just be in a position where, unhappy people are going to be a little bit quicker probably to write those reviews. And so you want to make sure you have that counterbalance, because the reality is the vast majority of your customers are going to be happy and satisfied. And you don't want that vocal minority to, end up skewing your reputation online. So make
Yeah.
sure that you're asking those customers to do that. Give them a little card, something to make it easy for them, when you're, delivering and dropping off. And I think, and just think about yourself as a consumer, right? So, just the other day I was sort of going, okay, I was looking for a bakery, and I don't know, nothing was really springing to mind. And so I looked online, of course, and then, there was one that came up that had 0 reviews. And
Hmm.
okay. And then there was one
Okay.
that came up that had 686 reviews with a 4.7 stars. So,
Yeah.
think about yourself as a consumer. Which one are you going to choose in that scenario?
The
And I
one
can
that
tell you which one
people,
I
yeah,
chose,
have
right?
been to.
The one that had
Yeah.
the
Right.
686 4.7 star reviews, because I thought, okay, this place is obviously well loved, right? Here's my opportunity to fall in love with it too. So help facilitate that journey, for your customers to, help them fall in love with you before you even walk in the door. I was anchored on the fact I was going to have a great experience
Yeah.
before I even got there. So don't miss that opportunity.
I feel like did someone give you the Nationwide playbook? Because there's a lot of words you're using that are similar to conversations I feel like we have on a regular basis with some of our members. Because I also feel like I have to bring up the fact that we didn't provide that to you or pay you to say that. So, so
No.
you're like you're saying no. I jest, right? You're like saying the things
Right.
that are, but it's important to hear because I feel like, you know, it's one of those things like I relate it to being a parent and like kids say, or
Yeah,
parents say things to their kids so often, right? But
yeah,
it takes like the teacher or some other figure in their life to say it, where it's like, oh, maybe I'll listen to that, right? it's
right.
but it's
No,
true.
it's so
Like
true. I
they need
tried
to
to
hear it
teach my
from a
son
different voice.
swimming,
Yeah.
massive fail. Took him to swimming lessons. It worked,
Whatever,
right?
however they said it, however that other person who said the same thing, the same words, word for word, what you said, no, it happens to get through. But like, it's important,
Mhm,
for sure to hear that because
mhm,
it's also cool to me too to hear you say those things because I know that it almost validates like, hey, maybe we're on to something with how we're talking about the retail
mhm.
business and talking about
Yeah,
e-commerce and talking about
yeah,
websites.
yeah,
Um, it's a proven method, and I mean, it's
yeah.
just understanding sort of consumer behaviors today and adjusting. And that's one of the things I
Right.
think, independent retailers, especially, if there's anything that they have that's a major leg up over, a big box corporation is that they can adjust. They have the
Mhm,
ability to pivot their strategy on a quicker turn. They're more of that tugboat as opposed to a giant steamer that can
mhm,
make those quick maneuvers. So to be able to adjust those, to those, new ways of a consumer behavior, they
mhm.
can do it. And they just have to find the ways, find the things that resonate, find the differentiators, for them, and lean into them. So I appreciate
Mhm.
all that. It's cool to hear you talk about that in that way, and validation for us, I think as well. So
Well, good, good,
yeah,
good, good, good.
right,
Well, e-commerce is kind of, what I spend, that's
yeah.
really what I spend the vast majority of my time working on, right? Through,
So you get to
through
see
our
it.
merchants
Yeah,
and through
you
our
get to see it.
partners. And so, this is, really kind of, an area of expertise for me. So, I'm glad
Yeah.
that we're all, singing out of the same songbook.
Yeah, right. No, that's awesome. Well, to get to the alternative payment methods, because I
Yeah.
know that's something that is
Yeah.
new that we've been talking about a lot with
Mhm.
our members, because it's one of those things that I feel like they were around and there were opportunities and we kind of saw them sort of creep into e-commerce over the last couple of years, but really again it's one of those pandemic things, right, that I feel like that helped it take off, and
Mhm.
become a thing. And that's just from our seat, but I'd love to hear your sort of perspective on alternative payments and first of all what they are, and then we can kind of dive into the ways that our retailers and our members can implement them.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think when you think about payments, you think about your sort of, we'll call it more traditional forms of payment, right? Kind of to your point, you think about your credit card, your
Yeah,
debit card, checks, right? If we're going old
yeah,
school here, your ACH. And so, but I really think almost the phrase alternative payment methods is almost kind of a misnomer these days because the alternative payment methods are just as commonplace now as the traditional payment methods. So in some ways, I really think the phrase alternative payment methods just needs some rebranding and probably some execution, from the vocabulary because it's really just about payment methods. And even if you think about PayPal, I'll take us back pre-pandemic. So in the last 5 years, over 70% of adults in the US have used PayPal to make a payment, online. So that is an absolutely massive number when you think about the adult population of the US.
mhm,
So that tells you it's not really an alternative. It's not a fringe. It's not just for kind of
yeah,
few special people, but this is really the mainstream as far as how people pay. And that really directly correlates to, the rise and the dominance of e-commerce, right? As people, are buying things online, things, digital wallets like PayPal, the original digital wallet, which was really which was created back in the 90s to solve this problem of, paying online. Those things have really, gained even more traction. And even PayPal itself, it's in over 200 markets globally. So we have a
yep,
huge, global footprint. And that really, trust underlies all of that. And there's a global trust in our brand because we are so well known, throughout the world. And so, there are certainly, regionally, there are alternative payment methods that are known in certain locales or regions, like in the Netherlands. There's a very popular online payment method called Ideal, but that's very unique to that
yeah,
particular country. Whereas PayPal is something very universal, and global. So I think, as to, why as a consumer you want to be using PayPal, it's really about our foundation is really around trust and security. And so, particularly when people are shopping small, rightly or wrongly, we assume that larger companies are more secure, right?
Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
bigger, they're recognized names. Yeah, I'm not saying, that's necessarily correct, but that's a perception that we have. Whereas when you're shopping small, you think, okay, this is a solopreneur. This is a small, business, maybe with a limited number of employees. They don't have the capacity to, hire dedicated fraud teams and security teams and things that you find in larger enterprises. So that's really where the value of PayPal becomes really paramount because when the consumer is purchasing online using PayPal, then we're providing the shipping information, right? We're saying,
Mhm.
okay, here's Rob's address. Here's where you send the basketballs or whatever the item is. Here's the money, but we don't actually give them any of the payment information. So, whereas when you enter your credit card directly into a site, you don't
Yeah.
really know as a consumer, what their security is. And so we certainly see continued surges in data breaches, and these folks who are doing this are getting more and more sophisticated. And so, don't put your business at risk, don't put your customers at risk, don't be at risk as a consumer, right?
Yeah.
There's actually a really interesting website where you can see how many security breaches your email address is associated with.
Mm. Wow.
Um, it's called haveibeenpwned.com, PWNED. And so it's a really fascinating place to go. And I think, one lens is where could I use PayPal
Yeah.
to prevent, some of this? And not to say, we'll never ever, be the subject of this, but this is our core competency is around payment
Yeah.
security, not really, selling basketballs or appliances or, other
Right.
things. So it's something to really, think about on both sides of the coin as a
Yeah.
consumer and, as a retailer or as a merchant.
And then you mentioned the security aspect and the idea too. I think there's sort of that reputation that comes along. Like if a smaller vendor, and
Mhm.
when we're talking about our members, independent retailers,
Yeah.
the idea
Yep.
of a customer seeing having PayPal's logo as
Yeah.
an approved like a payment
Yeah.
provider kind of
Yeah.
provides that validation to the customer that okay, this is a legitimate business that's doing
Mhm.
things that
Yeah.
um you know have the reputation of a PayPal and that they're
Mhm.
associated with, and kind of
Yeah.
provides that comfort, I think, to them too. As a
Yeah.
customer, that this is someone that I
Yeah.
I could trust to do business with
Mhm.
as well if they're shopping
Mhm.
online.
Yeah, well, and I would say, even more than that, it's really a driver of customer behavior, right?
Yeah.
There's a halo effect that our
Mhm.
SMBs, and merchants in general, benefit from PayPal is, helping the customer feel at ease is what's going to help them drive, that purchase
Yep.
behavior that you want them to take and
Yeah.
make. So, provide those rails for them to, I always kind of describe payments as, sort of like a slide, right? Like make a
Yeah.
nice smooth slide for them. No one wants to go down a slide with spikes coming out of it. So, um,
No, that's awesome. There's also the convenience factor too, right? Like I think, I know. Well,
mhm.
there's Venmo out there, right? A PayPal brand,
Yes,
and
which is a PayPal brand.
I
Mhm.
I think about, just being kid in little league, right? Going to the little league snack stand and seeing the convenience of being able like, "Oh, I forgot cash."
Mhm.
Well, guess what? There's ways to do
Right.
it it's proof too that,
Yeah.
obviously there's the e-commerce aspect of it, but more so the digital wallet, right? And being able
Yeah.
to provide those other ways of paying at the point of
Mhm.
purchase. I need a couple
Yeah.
bucks for some snack stand purchases that are always going to be asked for, whether they eat them or not, and to be able to do that in a way that, um, also for the like convenience for the customer, but convenience for the merchant as well, to be able to
Yeah.
accept those payments
Mhm.
in a way that, um, you know, allows it. If I didn't have cash or showing up without cash, you have customers
Right.
that show up without cash. Now they have another way to
Right.
pay. And you're not missing out on
Yeah.
that sale as well. So there's just
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
convenience side of things too to consider.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really about meeting people where they're at, right?
Right.
And
Right.
giving them that choice and flexibility. So, and that really enhances your bottom, and it enhances the customer experience and it enhances your bottom line at the same time. So that's truly a win-win scenario as a
Yeah.
merchant.
I feel like we've kind of addressed this and sort of talking about it, but the impact of to your point, maybe not the right thing to call them, but alternative payment methods. What
Mhm.
kind of impact have you seen, and sort of what's the potential growth moving forward of these types of payments, in this space?
Yeah. Well, and I think one alternative payment method that, we did not touch on, but that's, makes me think about the future as well is, buy now, pay later. That's
Yeah,
another
absolutely.
variation, another flavor of alternative payment methods. And PayPal has a pay in four solution that is certainly, something we've seen rapid adoption on from consumers. And really, it's something that makes it easy for consumers, right? The reality is people, want to be able to, typically even purchase nicer versions of the things that they want, right?
Hmm.
Do I want the better vacuum or the worse vacuum, right? Typically I want, if I'm buying something, I want the nicer version of the thing. And so
Yeah,
being able to sort of pay for something in four predictable installments is very nice for consumers and helps spread some of that, that financial pain without needing to lean into things like credit cards and other things that, can really create debt and, high
yeah,
interest rate scenarios. So I think it's really appealing to, today's customer across, demographics. So anyway, that's just another version sort of alternate payment methods and one that we've seen grow and will continue to grow, I think, as we're
yeah.
talking about this kind of growth. And I think back to the sort of misnomer of, alternative payment methods, even if you look at, something like, Cyber Monday, which is relatively
Yep.
recent, in relatively recent past, that day, just Cyber Monday, PayPal processed more than 87 million transactions.
Yeah.
So that does not really suggest, fringe. We were processing, 61,000 transactions a minute. And
Um,
so that really speaks to scale.
yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because that's where my head was going too, and you beat me to it by mentioning the
Mm,
holiday. Where as we're sitting here, obviously an early
mhm,
early 24 podcast, but we're not too far removed from that holiday shopping period,
mhm,
right? And
mhm.
numbers may not be right in front of you. If they are, that's awesome. But it just kind of speaking generally too, I'm sure as a provider of these types of payment methods, you guys have seen some tremendous growth just over the last couple of years on that number of transactions and just different ways too. Like I can only imagine the types of insights that you guys have as far as you know, how shopping online has evolved even just over the last couple of years as these more um I it's not true. Now I want to define the term with you, right? If we're not calling it alternative payment, is it
Yeah, it just
non-traditional
doesn't
payment
really seem
methods?
to
Does that
right, it
right? I
doesn't
don't want to
seem
call
to
it
do
alternative.
justice to the reality of, the numbers, right?
So non-traditional payment methods. Maybe that's what we'll go with, right? You got some great insights into the rise of those and sort of how
Mhm.
they've evolved over the last couple of years.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, well, I think, and I think we see this in retail and in e-commerce as well, just, fraudsters getting, more and
Yeah.
more creative. And so that's something that, we have a massive, InfoSec team and just, the things that they see and do are just absolutely, astonishing as far as the ways that we are constantly battling fraud and anticipating sort of where that hockey puck is going and
Mhm.
really getting in front of it. So it's a nonstop activity, and so that's something that isn't something our retailers or our merchants or our consumers always see or think about, but
Yeah.
it's something that we are always laser focused on. And there's some impressive numbers there. Mhm.
No, that's awesome. Well, for kind of the to round it up, the
Yeah.
last kind of pitch to a customer or a retailer rather about, the process. Well, let's walk through the process, right? Of adding PayPal to their website and kind of the hows and whys, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what's sort of the if they got to this point in the episode and they're still considering like, well, what's this really mean for me, right? Like I think we've done
Right.
a good job explaining, but kind of sum it up for us as far as
Mhm.
why an independent retailer should add something like PayPal to their website, and what's that process like to get set up?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good news. That's, on the, and when it comes to, things like this, it's not, the 90s anymore. People don't have to sit around, trying to figure out how to code their own websites. So the reality is that the vast majority of our SMBs and even many of, up funnel from there, up segment from there are really integrated. With PayPal through partners, right? A lot of our SMBs, use us and find us through our partners. So I think, Nationwide being a great example of that. So that's kind of nice because it's usually available kind of out of the box in some format as you're, onboarding with a partner. So that takes a lot of the trial and tribulation out of that because that's not ultimately your core competency, right? You want to focus on, selling your goods and services, not, dealing with all the sort of behind the scenes things. So, but I think, we did my team recently did a case study with BlendJet, which is a, sort of SMB that's grown into a larger merchant. They have these sort of like handheld blenders. And so when, we were talking to, their CEO as part of this process, and he had this great quote that was said, there's no good business reason not to go with PayPal. And so I think, putting, using your customers to help tell your story to kind of bring it back to where we started, I think is really critical. And, for them, they see a third of their transactions coming through PayPal, which I think, Carl, goes back to what we were talking about earlier around, especially for SMBs, that halo effect of, PayPal really giving consumers peace of mind and knowing that it's a trusted brand that they can trust. And really, when it comes to SMBs or really to any merchant, driving growth is key, and PayPal is really here to help with that.
Awesome. Well, I think a great way to sum it up, right? And I don't think I could say it better myself, so I don't think I'm even going to try. So I think all I'm going to say to that is, Dr. T, I appreciate the time and
Oh
the
yeah.
opportunity to have both you and the PayPal brand on our Independent Thinking podcast. So this was
Oh gosh.
a lot of fun and something I hope we get to do again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, same. This is definitely the highlight of my week. So yes, thank you so much for allowing for the space for that.
Anytime. Awesome. And thanks again to Dr. T for taking the time and chatting with us about the world of e-commerce and the role that it plays in today's digital landscape and the shopper journey and all that stuff and those non-traditional payment models, we'll call them from now on. So really cool to be able to chat with her and get the PayPal perspective on the world of e-commerce and just the impact it has on retail today and more specifically the independent retailer. So appreciate her taking that time. And as always, appreciate you listening to the Independent Thinking Podcast. And we'll catch you next time.